I love practicing law because there's an opportunity to try to create a little justice where there's injustice.
Hi, welcome to What the Earth, featuring smart and personal conversations with experts and thinkers working to solve today's biggest environmental challenges. I'm Erica Preuss, Multimedia Director at NRDC, and I'm here with our Chief Counsel, Mitch Bernard, and we are talking about the state of environmental litigation. I'm so glad we're having this conversation.
As am I.
Thank you. So I've understood the courts as being one of these three pillars of governmental power. And given what I'm reading in the news right now, that seems to be eroding. And I don't exactly know how to interpret it because I've had such confidence in what NRDC has done over the years and in what I've learned from you. But I'm scared. Are the courts holding?
I think essentially the courts are holding.
Okay.
There's a lot of talk about the Supreme Court, where there is a very conservative supermajority of justices.
Yeah.
That is a hostile forum for litigants who have the point of view about the law that we do and that our clients do.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, the Supreme Court decides maybe 60 cases a year.
Okay.
There are many, many thousands of cases that get decided in the lower federal courts that are not based on binding Supreme Court precedent and that are never reviewed by the Supreme Court. So I think people can overplay a little bit the influence that the Supreme Court has on many of our cases. I'm not saying they don't have a lot of influence. Of course they do.
Right.
But it's incomplete.
Okay, that's helpful. I think that's reassuring to hear. It sounds to me from what I'm hearing you say that like there is like the same thing that we've done for the last 50 so years with NRDC is something that we're continuing to do today.
It is, and I think it's something we'll continue to do effectively with a lot of success. Now, I think cases that go to the Supreme Court are less likely to go our way, but I think the lower courts are holding. And what we're seeing now is a tremendous amount of unlawful conduct by the federal government and a lot of litigation to check that unlawful conduct. And I think on the whole, the courts have been very responsive to those claims, including in our cases. You know, people make a big deal now. As a lawyer, it's very discouraging that when you read an article about a judicial decision, within 2 or 3 paragraphs, they're reporting who appointed the judge or the judges who decided the case, as if it's all political. It's not all political, particularly in the lower courts. We've had in the federal courts of appeal, which are 3-judge panels that hear cases and where most cases are finally resolved. We've had so far 10 cases before appellate panels that have had at least one Trump-appointed judge. We've won 8 of those cases.
Oh, that's great.
So it is very possible for us, when we litigate rigorously as we do, to persuade judges, no matter who appointed them, of the validity of our legal position. And we will continue to try to do that.
Can you give us an example of a case that has gone in this way?
Sure. So there was a case involving real overreach by the Transportation Department on an issue having to do with fuel economy from vehicles. And we thought that what the government did was unlawful, and we sued. And it got up to the Federal Court of Appeals, which was the final court to listen to the case. It was a 3-judge panel in New York. All the judges were appointed by President Trump, and we won 3-0. And the reason we won is that we had a better legal argument. So I think it's important for people to understand that the higher up you go in the system, the more room there is for ideology to intrude into judicial decision-making. And it may not be political ideology. It may be jurisprudential ideology, a judge's view of how the law works. But it doesn't mean we can't win there. And We're very careful litigators. We're experienced litigators. I think we've earned a lot of respect from the courts. And I'm not saying the complexion of the courts hasn't changed somewhat. It has, and it's grown more conservative. But there are still many, many courts in which we can get a fair hearing, and we're going to continue to pursue litigation. You know, another thing to keep in mind is the necessity for litigation. Mm-hmm. So let's say you have a federal agency that rescinds or rolls back a regulation that's protective of the environment or human health. Mm-hmm. Unless we sue and prevail in court, that becomes the law.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
So when there's an important move by the government that we believe is unlawful, violates the law, we need to be in court. We need to challenge that. That's the protection we have. Mm-hmm. And in many cases, it's the last protection we have. Right.
Yes. I want to take a step back. How did you get into this line of work?
Indirectly.
Okay.
I went to law school and had a fellowship to do civil liberties, to study civil liberties and civil rights law. And the Civil Liberties Union wasn't hiring. Okay. So I went to a public interest place that was more general and fell into an environmental case. I never took an environmental law course, no particular interest in it, wasn't an environmentalist particularly. Okay. I went to law school for a pretty specific purpose, which I would say is to try to provide effective legal representation for people who didn't necessarily have access to it. Okay. In other words, to represent less powerful people and entities against more powerful forces. So I found in this environmental case I worked on, which had to do with a proposed highway off the west side of Manhattan in New York, a highway called Westway. And I just fell into this case completely by accident. And when I was just starting to practice law, I spent 2 years, when I was a year into practice, I spent the next 2 years doing nothing but working on this case around the clock. Wow. And what I found was the dynamics that had drawn me to practicing law, because we represented a group of fishermen who were concerned about striped bass in the Hudson River. Okay. And on the other side was the President of the United States, who had a position in favor of this highway, Governor of New York State, Mayor of New York City, the 2 senators from New York, the 3 daily newspapers in New York, the real estate industry, the banks, the construction unions, and all the other unions that followed them. Everybody was in favor of this thing. Yeah. And this was a bunch of fishermen. Yeah. And mass transit advocates, because there was an opportunity to trade in the federal highway money for mass transit improvements in New York. So the dynamics for me were, that's why I wanted to become a lawyer. We had 2 lawyers on our side. My mentor, a brilliant litigator, and me, like 1 year into law practice, basically carrying his bags and working hard, but I had no real experience.
Learning on the job.
The other side had 18 lawyers at the argument. The table for their side could only fit 6. They came up in 3 waves of 6. And so that's kind of why I became a lawyer.
Wow.
You know, to be on that side. What they were going to do for this highway was they were going to fill in 1/10 of the width of the Hudson River between the Battery Park and 42nd Street with landfill. And they were going to drive a tunnel through the landfill for the highway, and then they were going to have the land on top for real estate development, which helps explain why so many powerful economic and political forces favored the project. Yeah. So they had a permit. Without this lawsuit, the lawsuit was the only thing that stood between the moment we were in and the construction of the highway.
You were fighting for the underdog.
That's right. And the litigation was all there was. The highway was just going to be built without the litigation, and if we didn't prevail in the litigation. And fortunately, we did.
I was going to say, did you win?
Yeah, we did. And the highway was never built, and there's a park there now. And The striped bass in the Hudson River,
Lived another day.
I think, are flourishing. Yeah.
Excellent.
But when I finished working on that case, I went to work for the Coalition for the Homeless. I litigated cases representing homeless people in New York.
Yeah.
I didn't
You didn't
continue in environmental work because I was a lawyer who had worked on an environmental case. I was not an environmental lawyer as I saw it.
Mm-hmm.
In any event, then it turns out there was a charitable foundation that was funding me to do the homelessness litigation that also was a funder of NRDC. They knew about my background in this environmental case, and they kind of they gave NRDC a grant to hire me. And that's how I arrived at NRDC.
Wow. And when did you start?
1988.
Okay.
And I've been there since. I'd say there have been about maybe 7 years during that period when I've done other things. I worked for 3 years for a federal judge in Manhattan who appointed me to monitor a sentence he imposed in a criminal case against a company that had committed environmental crimes. I did that for 3 years. And a little later, I spent 2 years doing investigations for the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan. And then I've spent about 2 years at home taking care of our kids, being the full-time stay-at-home dad.
Nice. Wow. I like this trajectory. Yeah.
I have come very happily and thoroughly to embrace environmental values.
Yeah. How did it evolve over time?
Yeah, it did evolve over time.
Yeah.
And working with colleagues and working on cases. And I'm a true believer now in what I understand to be environmental values, the responsibility we have to protect and enhance the planet and to fight for the creatures in the land who can't speak for themselves. And also the justice issues have drawn me. I arrived at NRDC right at the time when frontline communities and environmental justice groups were urging mainstream national groups like NRDC to get more involved in justice issues.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that NRDC's move into that area is just one of the things that has kept me here because I've worked on a bunch of justice-related cases, and those are really important to me. And I think the environmental movement is much richer now because of its understanding of the inequities that are out there and the need for groups that have the capacity to help address them, to work side by side with EJ communities.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about some of those cases that you've worked on, specifically the ones that have a little bit more of an environmental justice component?
Sure. So one of them, somebody had the idea to build a big, fancy federal courthouse right next to a historic, mostly lower income, person of color community or small part of Albuquerque, kind of on the outskirts of Albuquerque. And they wanted to build this gleaming courthouse. And the federal judges in Albuquerque were involved in the design and everything that. And the people in this small kind of environmental justice community, I would say, is a historic community, were very worried about the courthouse for good reason. Their people were not going to get the jobs that it created. And all the infrastructure in the kind of law world in Albuquerque and really a lot in New Mexico was downtown and would have to go back and forth right through this community and would have, in the view of many people in the community, just destroyed it. And I think the powers that be didn't care much about that. And we were called in by a group that, an organizing group there who were interested in, who introduced us to people in the community. They were interested in possible legal approaches. And there was a wonderful woman there, Loretta Naranjo, who stood up against the patriarchal leadership in the community, which was sort of making nice with the people who wanted to build a courthouse. And she led a kind of insurgency within the community. And we met her, talked with her, tried to understand what she wanted, and we represented her and her group in opposing the courthouse to try to protect this community. And it was fascinating. And I so wanted to litigate the issue because the judges in town, we were going to file a federal case. It would have been assigned to one of the judges who had helped design the courthouse.
Okay.
So I didn't know what they were going to do. They probably would have kicked us up to Santa Fe or maybe Denver or something. I'm not sure they would have been able to hear the case, but I really wanted to litigate it.
And what was the part of it that like piqued your interest? I want to be a part of this facet.
Because the community, which didn't have any real clout, didn't have any real say-so over its own fate, wanted us to help them. That's what drew me to it.
Yeah.
And we spent a lot of time there listening to people in the community, trying to understand what they wanted. And so we kind of we created a legal strategy. We got the federal government to say, if we can get the city of Albuquerque to say they don't want it, then we'll withdraw. And so the vote is taking place one night in Albuquerque in this kind of auditorium where the city council is there. The place is packed. People are testifying. Our clients are testifying. And we prevailed by one vote. And then we went to the federal government and said, look, make good on your commitment. City of Albuquerque voted no. They said, okay, we'll withdraw. And that was it. So I didn't get to bring the lawsuit, but we prevailed. And I still remember being in the community the night that this happened. It was a celebration, people on the streets.
Really?
Loretta's family cooking food. And that's one of the reasons I became a lawyer.
I love that. So I know some of the cases that you've worked on have lasted decades.
Yeah, it's true.
Which feels like...
That means I've been a lawyer for decades.
It does mean you've been a lawyer for decades. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of these longer cases and how does that like evolve over time? Like, and how do you hang in there?
Well, this is a good question because it highlights something that is distinctive, I think unique about NRDC within the environmental movement.
Yeah.
So there's a case involving the Penobscot River in Maine. There was a company that was making chlorine bleach for the paper mills in Maine.
Okay.
And they used a process now outdated that involved a lot of mercury. And they ended up releasing ungodly amounts of mercury to the Penobscot River. The plant was right on the eastern bank of the Penobscot.
Can you talk a little bit about what that does when that mercury is released?
So mercury is a very potent neurotoxin, particularly if it's consumed by humans, particularly problematic for pregnant women and children under the age of 8 because it causes neurological delays and problems in the developing brain. And so it's a very significant contaminant. It also doesn't biodegrade, which means it stays in the environment essentially indefinitely. Decades, maybe centuries. It just stays there. So here you had a situation where there was a lot of mercury that was going into the river. So EPA shows up because they found out that there was mercury in the river. And they asked the plant, which was owned and operated by a big chemical company located in the Midwest, but they had this big facility in Maine. And the company stonewalled them. They said they were going to sample and see where the mercury went. They never did it. The government let them get away with it.
Okay.
So we got a call from somebody in New England who said, I heard about this mercury problem. Will you look into it? We looked into it. And indeed, there seemed to be a problem that the government wasn't taking care of. Fortunately, under a number of federal environmental laws, citizens can sue polluters directly if the government fails to act. So we looked at this. There was little evidence, not much, because the company had stonewalled the government. So there wasn't much data, and the government didn't collect its own data.
Okay.
So we had a kind of a thin reed on which to rely. But we filed this case in 2000, representing a group called the Maine People's Alliance, which is a grassroots group in Maine, a great group, and NRDC members who live in Maine. And we went to trial and prevailed. We went up on appeal and prevailed. And 22 years after we filed the case, the court approved a decree that sealed our victory in the case. And the company will pay hundreds of millions of dollars to accelerate remediation, to remediate the mercury in the river. And we stayed with it for all that length of time, and that's what it took. It's hard to litigate, and it's not, you can lose quickly, but it's hard. It takes a long time to win.
Yeah.
Because of various reasons. And we stayed with it. And this will be the largest river cleanup in the history of the state of Maine. And what really pleases me about it, I think, as much as anything, is that if we hadn't sued, this goes back to what we were talking before about the sometimes essential nature of litigation. If we hadn't sued, the company would have walked away scot-free. One of the fundamental precepts of environmental law and values is polluter accountability. You know, the Penobscot River does not belong to this chemical company. It belongs to nature. It belongs to the people of Maine. And this company polluted the hell out of this river. They should be responsible for helping to clean it up. That's fundamental. And we vindicated that value in this case. So that is satisfying. The other thing is that if we didn't bring this case, no one would even know about this pollution. In other words, people knew mercury went into the river, but they didn't know where it went.
So, you know, pregnant women and parents were not aware.
Would be eating contaminated fish and shellfish, including lobster, which a lot of people eat. The fishermen down there, the lobster fishers, they catch fish and they feed their families with this. And some of the lobsters in the part of the commercial fishery downriver from this chemical plant had tissue mercury in lobster tails, concentrations that are more than 5 times at the extreme, what the state of Maine says is safe for people to consume. So this one, it's not only all of the animals lower down on the trophic scale, but this affects, it goes all the way up the food web to human diet and effects on human beings. So nobody would even know this because
of the testing. The testing only resulted from the case being brought.
Only.
And then.
Yeah, that just happened because we stayed with it.
Yeah.
And I don't.
Did you stay with it?
Yes.
All 22 years?
All 22 years. And the remedy.
Were there other people here at NRDC
absolutely.
who stayed with it the whole time?
I've got a host of colleagues who were instrumental.
So back to today, this process of the consistency and the persistence of NRDC's legal approach. How do you see that applying to the way this moment, basically, that has shifted a little bit in the way that the courts are made up? Do you still have the same amount of confidence?
I do.
You do?
And here's why.
Okay.
We have a very stable, sturdy team of about 40 now. People who all they do is litigate. That's their expertise. It's not an expertise on air or water or toxics. It's expertise in litigation because our adversaries in court have that same expertise. These are very versatile and well-trained people. We have historically extremely extremely little attrition. So these are lawyers who know how we work. I think that Michael Wall, our chief litigation officer, thinks that pound for pound, there's no better environmental litigating group anywhere, at a law firm, at another NGO, in the government, state or federal. And I trust his judgment about that. And one thing we have, for an NGO, we're pretty big and substantial, compared to the fossil fuel industry, where minuscule, but we can afford to stay with a case for 22 years. And one of the things that is noteworthy, I think, about the Penobscot River mercury case is that I don't believe there's anyone else who would have brought and litigated and persisted in that case other than NRDC. No other NGO, no other for-profit private firm doing it pro bono. The government, of course, did not do it. I don't think anyone else would have done what we did. And I think that's still what drove us to do that, still drives us. And so I think we'll continue to have that kind of continuity and persistence and tenacity. And that's what you need in order to be a truly effective litigator.
Also think it seems like it's what you need to be a truly effective advocate too.
I would say that's true. I meant litigation just because it happens to be what I know more about, but you have to be a tenacious advocate. You have to be a persistent advocate because the other side has the resources and the intention to wear you down.
Right.
And that's not an option for us.
I like that not being an option for us. And I think that's a really important point. So many conversations with friends and colleagues, even just this idea of the environmental space, everyone feeling a bit worn down.
Not me.
I know you don't. So that's and so I take such inspiration from that. And I'm wondering if you could share how you continue to find that well, because I think other people want to tap into that.
So it's natural for me. So let me try to describe it. I think the first thing for me, maybe there are two principal things. The first thing is meaning. You know, the idea of that a lot of people have, or that they want to find meaning. They want to be on this journey, and somehow meaning is going to arrive. I've never looked at it that way. I think the thing about meaning is to make meaning, to create meaning.
How so?
Not by doing this work. To me, this work is meaningful. You know, when we meet with, you go to one of these beautiful places, one of these monuments that we've helped get designated as a monument, and you realize that this land is not only beautiful, but sacred to a number of people. And you see the attacks against it, the threats against it. It is meaningful to resist those attacks and try to protect a monument, which, as I said before, doesn't speak for itself. And the same with people. You know, when we do one of our cases in Albuquerque, these people are breathing that polluted air. And to me, it is meaningful to fight alongside them. And, what's better than that? I mean, what's better than that in work? To feel like you're participating in a fight that's meaningful. And I feel that every day. Every day. Now, I know the world is discouraging. You read the news. There's almost not a person I know who doesn't limit their intake of news these days.
Yes. Almost everyone I talk to says, I dive in so I understand, and then I have to shut it off for a couple of days because I'm too overwhelmed.
I get it. And so what's better than fighting against that darkness? That darkness is encroaching. We need to shine a light on that.
Yeah.
That's what we do. That's what we're constituted to do, to take on forces that are powerful and want to upend what we value most. So that's one thing, is just making meaning.
Yeah.
The other is making it with other people. It's the colleagues. It's the supporters. It's the feeling that there are co-travelers. We're not alone. And I feel that about our members, our supporters, our donors, my colleagues on the staff, and the people we work with in the field, the people we represent.
Yeah.
I feel a sense of solidarity with them. And that's inspiriting to me. And I don't want to let them down, you know? And so, you know, I'm not slow to get out of bed in the morning. You know, I recognize that there's a lot of harmful, truly harmful stuff going on.
There is.
And what's happening in the Justice Department and what this administration's attitude is toward the rule of law is, I mean, to me, it's a desecration of the rule of law. And that doesn't make me despondent. It enlivens me, makes me want to resist and fight back, because we embrace a set of values that I think has meaning.
Well, it sounds like you're doing an innate, like an instinctual job of reminding yourself frequently of why you do what you do and adding that meaning and reminding yourself that you're not alone in this effort, and that things always feel easier when you're part of a web or part of a team.
Sure. It's helpful to me. You say remind myself. It's helpful to me to feel that part of my job is reminding my colleagues of this.
Well, thank you. We like it too. Because everyone that I talked to was like, you get to have a conversation with Mitch. I love hearing him talk. So we appreciate it.
You know, I feel this genuinely, so it's easy to say it.
Yeah.
I feel fortunate to have the job I have.
Yeah.
Every day I feel like I'm fighting for something I believe in. I think we have a responsibility, and that responsibility feels good. And it goes back to the reason I became a lawyer, you know, to participate in creating some justice where there isn't justice. That to me is worth the effort.
Yeah. This is great. Thank you. Could you talk a little bit about the makeup of the team? You said there's 40 lawyers here now.
The thing that binds them together, everybody on the team, is an intense interest in becoming a terrific litigator. In other words, this is an unusual job in the environmental NGO world because it's all litigation. Okay. And most jobs in the NGO world for lawyers, may involve some litigation, but lots of policy work and regulatory work. It's relatively unusual that you have a group that's committed exclusively to the craft of litigation.
Can you talk about what that means when, like, the litigation versus the advocacy? Like, I understand it, but I think it might be helpful to.
So if you're an advocate, you may have a law degree, but you may lobby Congress, or you may work with EPA on a set of regulations, or, you know, that's what I mean by policy work. What we do is we work in the courts, and that's where litigation happens. And there's a set of skills that you need to develop in order to be an expert litigator. You know, one of the things about NRDC's view of advocacy, which I feel close to, you know, each group, and there are many great groups out there, but each group has kind of a niche, a sort of way it operates. NRDC, I think, is relatively unique in the array of tools it has that it brings to bear. And the idea is, look, these are very complicated problems often. And you may need policy work, you may need legislative, regulatory work, you may need communications, you may need campaigning, you may need science, you may need litigation. We have all of that. And so we can approach a problem and choose which tool or array of tools will be most effective in addressing that problem. So right now, all we can do in Washington, D.C. is play defense.
Right.
All we can do is litigate. Nothing good is going to come out of this federal administration. So we have to protect everything we can. We have to save everything we can. And that's going to be principally through litigation. But out in the states and the regions where people are trying to, and governments are trying to do affirmative things, we're doing affirmative things with them. And internationally, we're working there. So the array of geographies allows us to pivot and not just play defense when there's a hostile U.S. administration. I think that's a good method of advocacy.
Yes, and it sounds like a little bit of what you're saying too about the way NRDC is structured, and with the litigators only litigating, is essentially this organization has become 700 something strong of specialists, all doing their thing and then deploying which specialty at the right moment.
Right. So in litigation, when I talk about the versatility and the training of our lawyers, we can litigate any case on any issue, anywhere in the country, in any forum. That is very unusual for an environmental NGO to have that kind of range. It's not bound by geography. It's not bound by subject matter area. It's not bound by forum. We can do and do all of it.
One of the things we're trying to wrap up in each episode is talking about very explicitly for people what gives you hope. So
what gives me hope? A lot of things. I'm full of hope.
I know you are.
And what gives me hope is the substance of what we're fighting for. You know, and you don't have to go to the Arctic refuge to be inspired. That's inspiring.
Sure.
But you can walk down the street and be inspired in terms of our responsibility to protect this planet that we've been given. And being part, again, we're one piece of an elaborate puzzle, which is the resistance to the forces that are undermining the health of the planet and the creatures and the people who live in it. So one thing that gives me hope is a belief in the underlying cause that we're fighting for and the values that we're trying to protect. And I would include in those values justice. It's not just the trees and the wilderness who also need a form of justice, but people who are suffering disproportionately from the burdens of, pollution. And so fighting for those values gives me enormous hope. The other is, the people that we're doing it with. My colleagues, and again, as I mentioned before, all the people out there who are protesting or want to protest and who are resisting and believe in the rule of law and, want to enhance the planet and don't want to hurt it and want to move to a clean energy economy rather than going back to, the maximum polluting fossil fuels. The idea of solidarity with those people gives me enormous hope.
What do you think those people can do if they don't have the same avenue of litigation that engrosses their mind and really
they shouldn't all go to law school if that's where you're getting
Certainly not.
There's something for everybody to do. You can join an organization, and become part again of the kind of resistance or the effort to vindicate these values and protect what we want to protect. If you're in a position to support a place financially, you can do that. You can sign a petition. You can go to a demonstration. You can get in touch with your elected representatives. You can talk with other people about these issues. You can go on the NRDC website and gain more information and knowledge that you can then spread and talk with other people. We can all do things and feel like we're participating. So, and I think just doing that, participating in that way, generates hope. We talked before about meaning, and I think there's a related idea here to me, which is people say, you just said it, what gives you hope? And we have to be the hope. Mm-hmm. It's not a matter of, I'm going to go out and find hope somewhere.
Yeah.
We have to generate hope.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be that force in the world.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of our responsibility. There's a long tradition of resisting injustice.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some in the environmental sphere, but there's plenty in other spheres of life too. And that gives me some grounding and comfort to feel that we're part of a tradition of opposition to authoritarianism, opposition to injustice. And we're not the first ones who are doing what we're doing now. We follow a tradition of courageous, noble people and organizations that have fought for the values that we've been talking about.
Yeah. So it's like we're not only a cohort in the present, but connected to a history.
I feel that. And that also is a source of hope.
Yeah. I like that a lot. Well, thank you, Mitch. This was such a wonderful conversation, and I feel such a privilege to work with you and to hear all of this. And thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure. I look forward to seeing you in the hallway.
Sounds great. Sounds good. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe at our YouTube channel, NRDC Flicks. We'll have new episodes out every week. Thanks.